Welcome to the Independent Schools podcast with me, Juliet Corbett. I'm absolutely passionate about adapting best practice and research from the business sector to address the real-world challenges being faced by schools. In this podcast, leaders of independent schools will learn actionable tips and strategies to strengthen their school's income streams, be it through fees, fundraising, or commercial ventures. So thanks for joining me today, and let's jump straight in. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode looking at reimagining your case for support. So this week we're going to be talking all about the ways in which fundraising projects need to be adjusted given the COVID-19 crisis. We're going to think about the messaging that we're using and the things that are going to inspire donors to support our schools. Now, this has obviously been a really significant live issue for fundraisers for independent schools worldwide since the pandemic broke out. And we're going to be thinking today about why it's important to link your fundraising to COVID-19 and the recovery from it. We're going to be thinking about how to make that link for a couple of different types of projects. So firstly, hardship funds. Secondly, bursaries, which are also known as scholarships or tuition support, depending on where you are. And thirdly, capital campaigns, so looking at fundraising for buildings and facilities. So once we've looked at those three types of fundraising projects, we're going to think a little bit more about the trends that we're seeing. And definitely there's a trend in the UK, at least, away from capital campaign fundraising and towards bursary fundraising. And we're going to think about why that trend has accelerated since COVID-19. And then to finish off, I want to leave you with some practical tips for how you can make your case for support really inspiring to donors in this environment. So we're going to be covering lots of really great general advice for schools. If you're looking for something more specific for your school or for a particular challenge that you're facing, then do get in touch. So the contact details for me are all on my episode notes. So if you go to www.consultjuliet.co.uk/009, you'll see my contact details, so do get in touch. You can also see on those episode notes a bit more information about my fundraising focus programme, which is starting again from September. And that's a really great way to get expert fundraising advice at a budget which your school can afford. Okay, so let's kick off. First of all, why is it important to link your case for support to the COVID-19 crisis? There are many donors who will be wanting to link their philanthropic giving to a sense that they're helping their economy and their society to rebound from the COVID pandemic. And so by connecting your projects through to that pandemic, you're inspiring these people to support your school as a way of them achieving that goal of helping their society and their community to come through the pandemic as strong as possible. Now, that may sound to some like I'm being a little bit opportunistic or a bit mercenary about all of this, and I really want to dispel that myth, because we always need to connect our fundraising projects and our school's mission and vision through to what donors want to achieve. And so what we're doing here is we're connecting the school's mission and vision and how it relates to helping us as a community or as an economy to rebound from the crisis. And we're finding opportunities for ways that donors can join us on this journey and how schools are going to help us all to recover from this crisis. So schools will already be thinking about this. I think every single school worldwide will have given thought to how it's going to be educating its pupils to really thrive in a post-COVID-19 economy in terms of their careers, in terms of the skill sets they need. Many schools have been supporting their local community during the crisis and or their alumni community. And a lot of schools have started a hardship fund or an emergency fund to help current parents who have had unexpected financially challenging times as a result of this. So schools are already connecting their mission and vision through to the crisis. So the job for us fundraisers is to find those projects which allow donors to be part of that journey, which is enabling our local communities and our school communities to rebound from the crisis. The more you base your fundraising on the school's values and ethos, the more genuinely it's going to be felt that this is not something opportunistic or mercenary. This is really something which is building on the school's values and ethos, which was already there before the crisis. It's something the school is naturally inclined to do in response to help people as a response to the crisis. And we're just asking potential donors to make donations which can help the school achieve those goals quicker or to achieve more within those projects. So this really doesn't need to feel like it's an opportunistic shift in case for support. This is just about making sure the fundraising messages are reflecting both what donors are looking for and what your school is already doing. Okay, that's why you need to connect your case for support to the COVID crisis. Next, we're going to think about how to make that connection. So first of all, thinking about hardship funds. So these have various different names. Often in the UK, they're called hardship funds or sometimes emergency funds. But basically, I'm talking about fundraising to help current pupils in your school whose parents would normally have been able to fund their children's education, but due to the unexpected crisis that we're in, have had temporary problem in paying their fees. And so the school will step in and discount those fees by offering a hardship grant for a limited period of time. So there's a clear connection here between hardship case for support and the bursary case for support that schools were using before COVID-19. So here we're talking about unexpected financially disadvantaged children who are already part of your school community. So it's still to do with children who have been, through no fault of their own, financially disadvantaged. The difference now is that this is a recent sudden event which has disadvantaged them, rather than due to their household situation in a more permanent sense, as we fundraise for within bursary fundraising. So to reassure people, I think we need to stress the fact that this is an unexpected crisis. Now, everybody knows that, but it's worth reminding people the crisis has affected people in a way which nobody anticipated. We couldn't have expected parents to be anticipating this crisis and therefore taking steps to avoid it, because nobody saw it coming. The second thing to stress is that this is through no fault of their own. Certainly it's through no fault of the children's that their parents are unable to pay just for a short period of time. But it's also through no fault of the parents. There needs to be a sense that people trust that the parents who are potentially in receipt of these grants have tried all other avenues and this is the last opportunity for them to keep their children in school. And I think as well it needs to be clear that it's for a transitionary period. This is not necessarily support which will be continuing for the children through their entire time at the school, but this is for the next year or two in order to help people to transition into the new economy as it emerges. So there are clear links there between the hardship case for support and the bursary case for support. We're going to be thinking a little bit in a few moments about the evolution and how a school can move from one to the other. So those are the key points, I think, for a hardship case for support, highlighting the fact this is unexpected, the fact that this is still about financially disadvantaged children. It's just that it's for a shorter transition period for children who are already part of your school community. So moving on to a bursary case for support. So bursaries are called different things in different countries, but I'm talking here about grants to parents to pay school fees where the primary determining factor for awarding that grant is the family's income. So it's a means tested grant. Now there may be elements of academic achievement or musical achievement or sporting achievement that are weaved into this sometimes, but the primary criteria is the family's income. So we've seen a lot of media coverage around the fact that social mobility is likely to be further negatively impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. Here in the UK, the Sutton Trust, which is an educational charitable trust, produced some research and some thought pieces around the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it came to the conclusion that it would have a far-reaching negative consequence for education and social mobility within the UK. And it's likely to be mirrored by experiences in other countries as well, I would expect. So we're talking here about limited social mobility being further compounded by COVID-19. Just as we see in many other areas, this is an acceleration of an existing trend. COVID-19 hasn't necessarily triggered a lot of new trends. We're seeing acceleration in existing trends, and poor social mobility is one of those areas. So at the moment, we're looking at the early research. There's not a huge amount of concrete data to support this supposition that the crisis is negatively affecting social mobility, but we certainly need to be alert to concrete evidence and research which may emerge over the coming months. So assuming that we believe that COVID-19 has negatively affected social mobility, this serves to reinforce the case for support that we were using for bursaries before the crisis. So when we're talking about transformational bursaries, this is bursaries where you're giving 100% of school fees so that you're really helping out severely disadvantaged pupils to come through the independent education system. So that case for support, that transformational bursaries assist improving social mobility within society, is still going to be the same case for support in the COVID-19 era, but it's important to have the data on the research for your own country that shows that COVID-19 has further challenged social mobility. So there are obvious connections here between the case for support for hardship funds that we just spoke about before and bursary funds. And it seems to me that there's a natural evolution from one to the other. So I can see it as being a really obvious strategy that for schools that are currently fundraising for hardship funds could quite seamlessly move into bursary fundraising at whatever point seems appropriate for your school, whether that's this autumn, whether that's in the spring or next year. So I think this transition is something to be planning now. The strategy around transitioning from your hardship fund case for support to your bursary case for support is something to be thinking about now. And I think as well that a lot of schools will be thinking about running these in tandem for at least a short period of time. So the hardship fundraising may continue perhaps amongst your current parents, while perhaps your alumni community, you switch to bursary fundraising at some point over the autumn or early next year, 2021. And also don't forget, it's not just about bursaries. Social mobility is also greatly benefited by the partnership work that most independent schools are doing with state sector schools. And I would predict that there will be opportunities for fundraising projects around that partnership work, which I think schools would be well advised to explore a little bit further. We don't see a lot of this type of fundraising in the UK at the moment, but I think it should be something that we're looking at a little bit more consciously going forwards, partly because transformational bursaries are very expensive to provide. That shouldn't stop us from fundraising for them. They're a fantastic thing to do, but it only affects a small number of people, whereas funding work in terms of partnerships with state-funded schools allows your school to have a positive charitable impact on a much larger number of children. So I think over the next couple of years we're going to see a lot more creativity around fundraising for these sorts of partnership projects as well. And really important to keep your eyes open for any opportunities to explore those sorts of projects. Okay, so we're going to move now on to the case for support for capital projects. Now, by capital, I mean anything to do with building new buildings, refurbishments, new sports facilities, anything where the end result of the project is a physical change on the school site. So I made this prediction a little while ago that I think it's much more difficult to connect these sorts of projects to the COVID-19 crisis. Having said that, there are ways that you can do it. So first of all, I think it's really important to avoid any sense that the building or the facilities that you're fundraising for are either a luxurious extra, which is a little distasteful in the current climate, or is somehow risky to the school. So if it's somehow felt by your potential donors that the school is being a little foolhardy in continuing with the building project, given shifts in business models, changes in recruitment and balance between boarder numbers and day school pupils and so on. If there's any sense that your capital project is either overly luxurious or overly risky, I think it's time to pause and take a look and take stock of your project, because those sorts of things are going to start to ring alarm bells with not all donors, but with enough that it may mean you're not going to find your targets as easy to reach as you thought previously. Now, there are a couple of positive things you can look out for, which you might want to harness within your capital project case for support. So, is there any way in which this building project that you're fundraising for is going to strengthen your school's business model, given the challenging times that we're in? So if you can make a connection, especially for Potential donors who have quite a business frame of mind, if you're making a connection between, let's say, a new sixth form centre, which is going to improve your chances for recruitment within the local sixth form market or the boarding sixth form market, which then in turn reinforces your recruitment numbers and therefore is a foundational element of your business model going forwards. That's a really important message to be getting across. Similarly, sports centres often create some kind of income flow through hiring out facilities and so on. If that is an important part of your school's business model going forwards, really articulate that, especially in one-to-one meetings with potential donors who have a business mindset. If you're already kind of in the middle of building or you're about to break ground for the building project, if in any way the timeline is going to be challenged by the lack of funding, then that can create a really urgent call to action, in the sense that this is something that the school is committed to doing and achieving, but given the crisis, you need your potential donors to really step up now in order to support the school in achieving these funding goals within the time frame which had been identified. So that really creates some urgency around the project that you could use. So in addition to strengthening your school's business model, the other way you can really connect your case for support for capital projects through to the COVID crisis is thinking about how it connects to your local community. So if you're creating facilities which are going to be open to the local community at low cost, that's something to really accentuate, because I think this idea that our schools are embedded in local communities and need to be a force for good in those communities is something that's really important at the moment. But also anything you could do to perhaps commit to using local contractors in your building project as far as possible might help to secure local employment, boost the local economy and so on. So you can think about whether there's a link between your project and some kind of benefit for the local community. That could also be connecting it through to the COVID crisis. So those are ways you can connect capital projects through to the COVID crisis. But as I said before, I do think this is a little bit more difficult than for the bursary fundraising case for support or the hardship fund case for support. So I first put this view out there that capital campaign fundraising would be more difficult than bursary fundraising back at an IDP webinar at the beginning of April. And I have to be honest with you, back then I felt a little bit nervous making that prediction, but I said what I thought, and I genuinely felt that that was going to be the case. And actually, having spoken to many directors of development since then and listening to webinars that others have held and so on, I do think this is now an increasingly majority held view, that there is this shift in the possibilities around bursary fundraising being greater than the possibilities around capital campaign fundraising. Now, in the UK, at least before COVID-19, we were already seeing this trend. There was already a trend towards bursary fundraising and away from capital project fundraising. And that was seen in the benchmarking report back in 2018, where it actually specifically said, this is the IDPE Graham Pelton benchmarking report, actually said bursaries became the undisputed centre of fundraising programmes in 2018. That trend has been accelerated. And I think schools who are listening to this, who are considering capital campaigns still, doesn't mean you can't do it. It means in the short term, it's going to be slightly more challenging. And so using a feasibility study is going to be really important to helping you understand what's possible. And any schools that are thinking about a feasibility study and want something which is a more flexible, perhaps something where you could be coached to conduct a feasibility study in-house, or a more flexible offering from a consultant, then do get in touch, because that's something that I've done before with great success. So the final thing I want to touch on in this episode is some really practical tips that are going to help you to make your case for support as inspirational as possible. Now, we know that people like giving to people. They like to know how their donation is going to impact on the lives of others. So even for building projects, it's important that you showcase how your project is going to be transformative for individuals within your school community. Now, the big stumbling block here is that most of the beneficiaries of certainly bursaries and hardship grants are completely anonymous. It makes it really hard to collect and then tell the stories about the impact these donations are having. But this is something that fundraisers need to really be creative about, because it is absolutely critical that you have as many stories about the impact that donations are having on the people within your school as possible. So the types of challenges that fundraisers face here is when senior leadership teams or heads and governors restrict even the most senior fundraiser within a school knowing the names of the recipients and the stories behind the impact that those donations have had on those individual children. Now, I completely understand that confidentiality is absolutely an underpinning feature of this, but senior fundraisers do deal with incredibly confidential information in all parts of their work. So I think that it is entirely appropriate for them to also have access to the names of the bursary recipients, hardship recipients, and the stories behind why they need that support and how it's making an impact on their life. Now, they then need to be trusted to completely anonymise that information when it's being shared with donors, either through mass communications like email newsletters and websites, or in one-to-one conversations. And I feel passionately that these donations, especially bursary donations, can have a really important transformational impact. So we do need to find ways through this maze of confidentiality on one hand, but the critically important role that storytelling plays in fundraising on the other hand. So as a school fundraiser, if you feel that you're not able to tell the stories fluidly and inspirationally as you would wish to, please revisit this with your head and your senior leadership team. Let them listen to this podcast and understand how critically important this is to underpinning a successful case for support. So I'm not telling you anything new. As school fundraisers, you will already know this, but this is an area that's worth revisiting given the increased competitive nature of philanthropy at the moment. So hopefully that's been helpful. Do get in touch if there's anything particular you want to ask me. Do sign up for my mailing list. I'm planning a few webinars coming up over the next couple of months for people to join and ask me any questions at all about their school's fundraising. So do go to the website and sign up for that. Again, all of the links are at the episode notes, which is www.consultjuliet.co.uk/009. I love to hear your feedback, and stay well, and I'll talk to you again next week. Bye then. So that's it for now, and thanks for listening. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the Independent School Podcast to hear our next episode, or sign up for my regular newsletter at www.consultjuliet.co.uk/sign up. Great, see you next time.